Hey guys, subscribe for daily content, and if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks! What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Chaves T.A.K, or if you've got kids watching, plug their ears, here you go. You've got about 5 seconds to plug their ears because I'm going to say a bad word here. Tiny ass knife. That's literally what it stands for. And while it is a tiny Chaves, it's kind of a tank, right? Which is something that some people, including myself, enjoy in a novelty sense, and other people might find it to be kind of an inconvenience. We're going to talk all about it, but thanks so much to my generous patrons who are supporting me right now. There's a link for Patreon right down below, and please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. This knife was sent to me by James. That's all the information there. He doesn't have Instagram or anything, so thank you very much, James. I really appreciate that. Let's go ahead and do some size comparison. Actually, no, let's go ahead and measure it first. Overall length of the T.A.K. This is the Ultramar T.A.K. or T.A.K, right? 6 1/8. Your blade length is coming in under 2.75. Yeah, a little under there. Cutting edge is coming in at about 2.5 on the dot. So there you go. Let's go ahead and do some size comparisons. How about up against the Chaves 229 Redemption there? There you go. There is a major difference in overall size between these two knives. Now thickness though, it's actually pretty similar, which is kind of crazy, right? So yeah, if you like the tankier, smaller knives, you might like that. But there you go, for people wondering. It's definitely way lighter, though, as you would expect. So let's go ahead and do our standard size comparisons up against the Ontario Rat Model 1 and Model 2. You can see it's actually even shorter, quite a bit shorter than the Rat 2. How about up against... Got to get these other papers before I start that dialogue. Up against the PM2 and Para 3. Once again, definitely smaller than both. No question about it. Last but not least, the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue, and its little brother, the Benchmade Mini Griptilian. It's even smaller than the Mini Griptilian, right? This is, for Hinderer fans, this is very similar to the size of the Hinderer Half Track, which is also... literally a tiny tank. I mean, it's named after a small tank. So there you go. Let's go ahead and do carry profile. So thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. It's thick. I mean, it's not, for a little knife, right? It's not insane. It's like, oh my God, I can't carry it, right? It's thicker than the Para 3, right? Absolutely. No question about it. Length and height up against the PM2 and Para 3. You can see here, even though this guy does have a flipper tab, it's still really not that tall, which is why I put an emphasis on, like, don't freak out about the thickness, because if you're used to carrying something like the Para 3 or PM2, there's still more massive object in the pocket versus this guy, right? People are like, well, what about ratios? That's important. Kind of. I mean, it is for some people, right? Day to day, right? Just generally. I don't get too hung up on that. So there you go. Do with that information what you will. Let's go ahead and do a hardware check. Get out my tools here. I believe it looks like everything on this knife is T6. Let's give it a shot. Yeah, the pivot is a T6. The screws holding in the titanium scales, because we do have, as far as I understand, well... hang on here. I always forget because I've got a million bajillion knives here, right? It appears that the liner is also titanium. So never mind. The liner's titanium. I was about to say it's steel. The liner is also titanium. T6, 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 T6. There's a whole bunch of them, right? So you got a lot of pieces of hardware. You got a couple of standoffs back here, and it's because they decided to do a titanium liner lock instead of a titanium frame lock, which frame lock. I seriously just... Okay, so on a smaller knife, when you're flipping it, if you're used to larger knives, you might put your hand in the wrong place when you're flipping this, right? And if you do that, this was dumb. Number one, I'm right-hand dominant, right? So my right hand's going to know a little bit better. My left hand doesn't quite know what to do. So sometimes it gets in the way. You're going to cover that. And then when you flip it, because the tip of it is sharp, you'll catch yourself. I can guarantee you some of the people watching know exactly what I'm talking about. Excuse me. I'll just do this with my right hand. Or I'll keep this hand down. But anyways, what we're talking about. Hardware, lots of pieces. I'm actually applauding Ramon Chaves' decision to do a liner lock in this guy. I've said this many times. I actually prefer a liner lock over a frame lock here lately, right? I still like titanium a lot. If I can get titanium with a countersunk liner lock, it's not countersunk in this case, right? Or a liner lock in general. I actually like that. And the downside is to keep this the way that they decided to do this. I don't know why. You could have just done this screw up here and then maybe move this standoff up, probably because of the blade. Yeah, they did that because of the blade profile, right? A couple of screws back here and it would have been fine. I don't know why we needed all these screws right here, but that's what they did, right? So you get a lot of screws. They're T6. That kind of sucks, right? I don't know why they didn't. This is a kind of a meaty, chunky knife, right? A larger head size would have been nice, but it's never a deal breaker. Just be aware of that, right? Inside of it, we're kind of talking about it here. You can see that this is solid titanium throughout. There is nothing, no milling or anything like that, right? So your weight is probably, oh my gosh, it could be as much as 3.5 ounces in the pocket. Can you imagine that, carrying an object that weighs 3.5 ounces? Look at that, I'm almost exactly right. 3.67 ounces. But the ratios, no, the cutting edge to overall weight ratio, no, I can't do that. 3.67 ounces is 3.67 ounces. This is a mildly thick object considering the size of it, so it's probably not the most ideal thing to wear in athletic shorts, but it's just a tiny rectangle, right? So ratios and all that aside, I almost said nonsense there, but I know people light up my comment section if I talk about ratios being a thing of nonsense. It's just, it seems a little bit trivial when we're talking about something like this. It comes down to this. This knife will be, simply put, too thick for some people, but for the vast majority of people who are interested in the first place, they probably won't give a crap. I kind of think it's neat that it's thick. It doesn't give a lot. I think there's, this, people come to the conclusion that it must be more durable because it's thicker. No, right? They could have easily, in fact, I'm kind of surprised that these aren't thinner. The combination of the liners and scales aren't thinner, but they are what they are. It's not that big of a deal. Let's go ahead and move into the review. So this is not a 4-finger knife. Unless you have really tiny hands, this is a 3-finger knife. I'm going to say the same thing I said about the half track. I still would prefer that I could get a 4-finger grip on it, but because there's so much handle, like I'm talking about thickness of it, it does give that feeling of, ooh, yeah, confidence, little thick boy, right? Gives you that feeling of confidence. You're not actually gaining. I mean, you could be like, well, it's easier to hold on to if you really are going to use 3 fingers, right? There's a lot of objects here, and it's somewhat angular because it's just flat, right? The corners are all nicely knocked down. This is by no means an ergonomic masterpiece, but I will say this. The corners on the T.A.K are definitely nowhere near as pointy as the corners on the Redemption, like the one that I have. This thing has a few pretty sharp corners, right? And the jimping up here is a little bit sharp. So while I have more purchase room, more real estate on the 229, the larger guy, this guy's a little bit more rounded down. Now the pocket clip sticks up quite a bit, adding even more thickness, right? If we're going to look back here versus the PM2's pocket, well, I mean, this just feels a lot thicker because it's such a robust clip, right? People already are like, he has to know what I think about that clip. I gotta let him know what I don't like that clip. Go ahead, that's what the comment section's for. But this clip has been thoroughly discussed. I'll say the same thing I've always said about this clip. This clip is Ramon Chaves' clip. In the future, I don't know when that's gonna be. I've heard that his knives moving forward will be offered with both the skull clip and just a regular clip, to keep people from whining about it, right? I'm sure that people will still find a way. A lot of the same people whining about the clip are people who aren't even interested in the knife in the first place, right? Why are you wasting your energy? Doesn't make any sense. The clip is what it is. I kind of feel like these knives, the character, a lot of the characters of the clip, there's tons of people who love them, right? So whether you love it or you hate it, just remember you're talking about it. Even if you're like, I hate that clip, you're just drawing more attention to the brand, right? And that's, I mean, if that was a marketing strategy, it worked. If it wasn't, if it was just Ramon Chaves going, what's more than likely the case, Ramon Chaves going, I don't really care what people think, I just think it looks cool and I'm going to put it on there. So good for him. For me, even if I did receive my own without the with an option for a regular clip, I'd have kept the skull clip on there because I think it looks cool. I just do. Anyways, yeah, not an ergonomic masterpiece, 3-finger position, grip. It's fine. You can hold on to it. It's just nothing special, right? I mean, it is what it is. But it does, you know, there's a lot of object to hang on to, right? You're pretty locked in. This area right here, this ridiculously deep sharpening choil, I guess, because it's not a finger choil, right? I don't really know what I think about that. I mean, it's going to function. It just seems kind of excessive. Why didn't the blade just come back? I mean, like, you know, it's like I could have gained an additional 1/8 of an inch of cutting edge, right? It is going to get hung up and stuff, right? If you're like breaking down cardboard boxes with it or you're cutting into a thick package or something, it's going to get hung up in there. So while it adds a, you know, it adds some kind of, you know, tough guy characteristics, right? It adds some attitude. That's the word I was looking for. It adds some attitude to the blade. It's kind of unnecessary, right? It didn't need to be that big, but it is what it is, right? Not that big of a deal. These came in a bunch of different forms, right? A bunch of different variants. You have the choice of titanium. You have the choice of micarta, G10, carbon fiber, different colors of micarta and G10. You have the choice of a satin finished blade or a blacked out blade, black wash or maybe DLC. I can't remember, right? You also had the choice of either a drop point or a tanto. So that's kind of neat. There were a whole bunch of these that were available. You've got the Chaves key logo up there. Nice flat that carries out about 75-80% the length of the blade. Very robust out to the tip. Absolutely a capable blade. And the other nice thing is it's hollow ground up here, so it actually gets really thin down here. And it's nice and thick up here. So if you really have to do some digging around or whatever, you shouldn't worry too much about that blade. This is M390, so there you go. That's everybody's favorite flavor of blade steel, or I shouldn't say everybody. I say everybody, and there's a guy down there going, I prefer M4. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, like, again, you should comment and let me. That's fine. But M390 is kind of like the, if I'm going to spend this much money on a knife, I just want it to be M390 because that's what gives me the feeling of, like, hey, you know, that's a valuable steel, right? It's a good steel. It's fine. Incredible edge retention, good stainless quality. It's not super tough, kind of a nightmare to sharpen, but it's still the flavor, right? These are made by Riat, which is great. I don't have a problem with that. Not made in the United States, but Riat has arguably the best production, right, in this territory. The best production quality, the best production fit and finish of anything out there, right? So, however you feel about that is fine. You can feel about that. I will buy Riat knives alongside my US-made knives. I don't have a problem with that. Obviously, I own the big boy here, right? So I don't really have a problem with that. But considering the price on this guy as well, you're getting Riat's, you know, fit and finish. You're getting the quality overall, right? And all the tolerances and everything like that. So I don't have a problem with that. The action, by the way, in this guy is really good. It's not quite fall shut. Maybe with time it'll get there. Maybe a little bit of nano oil, but it's really smooth and very consistent. The detent is also nice and strong for a smaller knife. No detent lash or anything like that. You can, if you want to, push button it, but the flipper tab is pretty aggressive. I mean, there's a lot. I don't know that the flipper tab needed to be that big, right? You can light switch it, whatever. It has a nice snap to it. It's gonna flip, right? I really would have preferred a tumbled finish like they did on the original 228 Mid-Tech that was actually made in the United States. That had a beautiful finish on it, but they went with the machine belt satin, which is like what's on everything. I'm really bored of that, but it's not the worst thing in the world. It is what it is, right? Up here, these edges up here are sharp enough to shave your fingernail off. Here comes the AC. Sorry about the humming. But that's not generally where you put your finger. It's going to be right here. Unfortunately, this is also really sharp. So that's going to hurt. That's going to dig into your finger if you're really bearing down on it. But it's like, you know, if you're really bearing down on this small of a knife, you might need a different tool or just a larger knife in general, right? So the jimping's there. It'll definitely work with your fingers. If you're wearing gloves, no big deal. But this is a kind of a tiny knife to be going out and wearing gloves and doing a bunch of hard work with. It's there. It'll work. I really like that this is a liner lock. It doesn't matter where I put my fingers over here, right? If I'm flipping it right or left hand, it doesn't matter because no matter how much pressure I apply to this side, there's nothing exposed, which means I can't push the liner and the detent ball further into the detent hole, making it harder to flip. It also doesn't matter how hard I squeeze it during use. It doesn't affect the lockup. I just really like liner locks. Absolutely love them. What else is there to say about the blade? The edge feels good, very consistent, nice and glassy smooth. It's very sharp. No problem with that. The factory edge is great. You can flip the pocket clip over to the other side. This knife is arguably just as easy to manipulate with your left hand as it is your right hand. So even though it is a right-handed liner lock, lefties, if you've never manipulated, I'm sure you have manipulated a right-handed liner lock before. I'm right-handed. This is no problem for me. It's probably not going to be that big of a deal for you, but that probably is a preference thing, right? So that's nice. You can flip it over to the other side. The pocket clip will work. It's very thick and robust, right? And it's definitely more of a presentation thing than a utilitarian clip, right? The design is not utilitarian in nature. It's more meant to be like, skull, right? But it's cool. I like it, right? It'll slide easily over most thicknesses of pocket seam due to that nice ramp, so that's good. And the titanium is nice and smooth. The titanium's finish is great. We have a nice sort of matte, tumbled finish on this guy. A little teeny tiny bit of reflectivity, but it's good. There's another head over here. I honestly don't know if it's free spinning, but at least, you know, if it is free spinning, at least you can get into it. The worst is when it's free spinning and you only have one adjustment head. That sucks, because then you don't have any way to hold the other side in place, but it's fine, right? We have a little stop pin back here, and there is shouldering. You can see the blade will wrap nicely around that, so that's great. Knife is locking up very early at like 10 to 15%, but there's absolutely, and I can wrench really hard on that, and it's not going anywhere. No blade play up, down, left, or right. The blade is perfectly centered. This does have a teeny tiny little bit of lock stick, which is not really an issue. I'm sure that it'll work itself out over time. My own Strider / Medford 3/4 AR had a ton of lock stick for like a week, and then it just went away. And that's a raw titanium one. That's probably a carbonized titanium surface. Same fate will likely apply to this guy. So even if your lock stick gets worse over time, it will likely eventually get better. The only time that you should ever, the only time, in my opinion, that you've got an issue is when it's so bad that you need a tool to disengage the lock bar. If you can still do it with your finger, even if it's clicking, it's literally working itself out as I'm talking. Yeah, a couple of these flips, it's not sticking at all. Yeah. So it's not a big deal. Don't freak out if you've got a little tiny bit of lock stick. You should freak out if you have lock rock, detent lash, right? If it's wiggling in the closed position, which this knife does not have, it's fine. Biggest downside to this, it's kind of, it's going to be a little bit heavy for the size of it. Like the weight to cutting edge, if you get into ratios, right? For me, it's kind of like, I like that it's a little tank, but I know that that's going to be a problem for some people. The flipper tab is kind of excessive. It doesn't really need to be. I am glad that it's a flipper tab and not a thumb stud opener on this guy, right? Had they brought the edge back here to make it flippable, they would have had to put the thumb stud like right there, which means it maybe would have been a little bit in the cutting path. And I don't know how comfortable it would be as a thumb stud opener. So the flipper tab, I think, is the right idea. I think it just needs to be a little bit shorter. Satin finish, super bored of that. I really wish that Reout would do more tumbled stuff, because they do a great tumbled finish. I think it will look better on this. It's kind of rectangular. It's a smaller knife, so it's only a 3-finger grip, right? But it's fine. Some people just aren't going to like that. What's going to turn most people off is the general aesthetic. The aesthetic of these knives is polarizing for sure. And it's not just, first off, this aesthetic, I think a lot of people will look up at the top one and say it's a prettier knife. This guy down here is a little bit more squared off. Even though the corners are knocked down, the profile of it's more squared off because of how deep that is in relationship to the overall profile. Not everybody's going to love that, right? Most polarizing part is absolutely going to be the clip. You're either going to love it or hate it, and some people will, a lot of you are going to say, I'd buy that knife if it wasn't for the clip. Now, I will link these guys down below. I should have said that at the beginning. I'll link them down below. Sometimes they're available and sometimes they're not. People ask me all the time, why do you review knives or link knives that are not available? A lot of time, and when I say a lot of the time, I mean like 95% of the time, the knives that I'm reviewing, right, if they're not available now, eventually they will be. I provide the link so that you guys can go and click on the email me when available or sign up for notifications, which I understand it doesn't work all of the time, but that's your best bet. I do that so you guys can get your hands on stuff, because then when stuff does release and then it sells out, people say, I didn't even get a chance, I didn't even know it dropped. I didn't even get a chance. Sign up for email notifications if you really want it, right? If that's what your goal is. You might be able to get some right now. I don't know. I'll link them either way. If they're sold out, sign up for the notifications, because just because they're sold out right now doesn't mean that they won't come back. So anyways, overall quality, good. Build quality is great. Material is great, right? The design is, meh. I mean, it's more like for kind of like people who just want a chunky knife. Is it going to survive being used every day? Well, yeah, it's plenty durable, right? What's the price on it? $215 for G10, $220 for carbon fiber or micarta, and $225 for titanium. Those are the base prices for each material. There might be special variants that are a little bit more expensive. That's a very inexpensive Riot knife, and considering we're looking at titanium and M390, right? Yeah, I don't care that it's small. You know, there's always the caveman. Knife small. Small knife not have big price. Only big knife have big price. Brain not comprehend. Have to go eat rocks. I don't care that it's a small knife. That has nothing to do with the price or what the price should be, right? There's lots of small knives out there that are way more expensive than this. So the price is actually really good. I don't have a problem with that. This isn't going to be for everybody. As far as the price to materials to quality ratio, like all those, yeah, you're there. This is a recommendable knife, right? But it's just not going to be for everybody because of the aesthetic, right? Because it's a small knife, a thick knife, and because it's got that polarizing clip on it, right? So, if you're into the look and you're wondering, is the quality there? Well, yeah, absolutely. I think you'll be happy. Outside of that, it's probably not going to be the one for you. Guys, that's going to be pretty much it for today's review. I like this knife. Personally, I think this is really cool. It's one of the only smaller knives that I would actually carry. But I also am a big fan of Ramon Chaves' design aesthetic, and I like chunky knives, right? Anyways, please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.